Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari. Captain is down here making all of the gross noises, helping me record as he normally does. But today is the day before Valentine's Day. At least when you're watching this video, it's the day before Valentine's Day. It is not when I'm recording this. And every year in February, I usually spend a week torturing myself and reading contemporary romances. But not this year. I'm not going to torture myself this year. I have no contemporary romances for any project that I'm aware of this year that I need to read. So instead, I'm going to read fantasy romances. Like the romances that I want to read. Let's get us some fairy porn. But instead of just picking a bunch of fantasy romances to read, I have to make this some sort of challenge for myself, because I'm the type of person that reads better the less control I have over my TBR. Like, I'm fine with coming up with like a theme, but I don't want to like individually pick books most of the time. Sometimes I do. Right now I don't. I have way too many fantasy romances. I would just panic and not read anything this week if I had to choose my own fantasy romances. The Empty Vase is going to pick. As you can see, there's nothing in here for me to pick, so let's fix that. And I have created these little things. They are the books, but in little mini form. This handful is all of the books that I've bought on Stuff Your Kindle days, which just means that they're free for that day on Kindle. And I purchased them, and then I never read them because I don't know what 90% of these books are about. They were just free, so I had to have them, right? Stuff Your Kindle books go in first. I dropped 3 of them. Then this little stack right here are a bunch of books that I have on Kindle Unlimited that I should probably get to. So they're going in there. Thank you for the noises. These final 2 are the 2 fantasy romances on my TBR this month. My Dungeon the Books TBR that gave me way too many books to read. So like I desperately need to pull at least one, if not both of these books this week. So those go in there too. And then we'll give this a nice big shake. And then I'm not gonna look, I'm gonna look at you, I'm not gonna look at the jar, and I'm gonna choose this book first. Wicked Court. I have no idea what this is. I assume this is one of my Stuff Your Kindle books because I have no idea what it is. I think I would recognize the other ones. But first book, I will come back once I've read this and let you know what I think. Before we get into the video, I needed to film this clip, interrupt a little bit, and let you know that I've made the executive decision to not include any books that I DNF in this video. Let me explain. It's about the middle of the week and I've DNF'd a couple books already, and I'm just going to cut all filming of them from the rest of this video, so you might see some weird jumps between me wearing a shirt and saying, let's go draw a book right now, and then drawing wearing something completely different. That's because I cut whatever book that I drew there. Now, why am I making this decision? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Most of the books in my jar are indie published with very, very, very few reviews overall. I'm talking like under 100 reviews. And so far the 2 books that I've DNF'd have started out with a whole page right at the beginning that says, these are the content warnings. If you can't handle these things, then you probably shouldn't read on. I've ignored those content warnings, gone into the book, read the things that I was warned about in the content warning, and went, I don't really want to read this anymore. So it feels kind of unfair of me to portray these books in a negative light when they've done nothing wrong. Like, they told me the content was going to be there, and I'm the asshole who ignored the content warning and went on anyway. So I figure it's best to just not acknowledge these books' existence instead of shining a negative light on the books. At the end of the video, I will tell you how many books I DNF'd, though I won't tell you what they were. But let's get right into the first book that I did read. I promise I read the first book that I drew. It was fantastic. Let's talk about it. Wicked Court by May Sage. This is a very confusing series because it started out as a duology, the Darker Woods duology, but it seems like she is adding more books to it because of the popularity of the first two books. Also, the author is listed as Alexi Blake or May Sage. Alexi Blake is the pen name for May Sage. So if you're interested in this book and you see it under the name May Sage or Alexi Blake, same woman, you've got the right book. I like the old covers better. This cover is the copy that I got from the Stuff Your Kindle Day, which is up here somewhere. And then this is the original cover, I believe, for the book. And I like this one way better. But apparently you needed the generic fantasy romance in order to sell this. Now let's get into what the hell this book was about. This follows a fae pixie woman named Valerie. She is the granddaughter of the Queen of the Fae, and she has this really, I'm gonna say this, she has this really powerful power. She has a very powerful magic ability, and she's made a deal with her grandmother where she goes through life unnoticed, she doesn't use her power, and in exchange for not letting anybody know that she has this power, she's allowed to live. And her grandmother won't kill her parents. She has some abilities. She can fight with a sword, and she makes a career of bargains, but mostly she's considered poor gentry, and that's it. She's happy, she's good with her life. It's obviously going to change because it's fantasy romance, but this book is very short, so I'm not gonna like spoil anything of this. I don't know if this is Raylo fanfiction, but it gives the big man tiny lady thing of Raylo fanfiction, so I'm just gonna consider it Raylo fanfiction, whether it is or isn't. I enjoyed this. It's short, it takes no time at all to read. Fantastic all around. So you have my recommendation. It's not the most well-written book I've ever read, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with it. You have my recommendation. Also, if you're looking for fantasy romance by Black authors for Black History Month, well, hello, this book is for you. Just laid out on a silver platter like that. So yeah, I'm excited. The jar did me good for the first pull. Let's see what it's gonna do to me for the second pull. Uh-oh. Something jumped out. That one's out of the running. Let's go with this one. Again, I believe this is a book that I picked up in Stuff Your Kindle Day because I have no idea what it's about. But I guess I'm about to find out. I just finished The Glass Palace and it was good. It was fine. This is the easiest synopsis in the world because it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. That's it. Congratulations, you know the plot of the story. It reads like a fable with like a little bit of whimsy in it. It was cute. I like didn't hate it. Probably like a 3-star, like a high 3-star, where it's not anything that I like absolutely loved, but it was good. I will say the first 45-50% of the book was probably my favorite. Not necessarily for the story itself, but because I desperately wanted to be the main character. Like, the fantasy land that she lived in was the most perfect thing. It's all like plants and libraries and no people. Yeah, and she just spent her days reading, and that just sounded so nice. I don't know what else to say. And then there's like an adventure breaking the curse thing for the second half of the book. But yeah, it was fine. If it sounds interesting, read it. If it doesn't sound interesting, don't read it. That's pretty much all I've got. Books next. We're looking over here. I need some mass. This is not mass. This is Veins of Magic by Emma Hamm. This is a series continuation for me, so I know what this book is, and it's a Kindle Unlimited book. Veins of Magic by Emma Hamm. Here I am editing, and for some reason I never gave a synopsis of this book. So real quick, hey, this is another Beauty and the Beast retelling. This is the second book in the series, so while the first book is really just a Beauty and the Beast retelling, the second book just like continues the story from the first book. And that's all you need to know. This is like a true 3-star. Like, it wasn't bad, but it also wasn't good. It just existed. And I think this is a case of, like, the writing's fine, the story's fine, but the way the story's told is not something that I personally prefer. In this story, there's plot, there's action, but it skips quickly over the action scenes. Most of the meat of the book is like the day-to-day lives and thoughts and activities and relationships between the characters, which is fine. It's just not my personal favorite thing in a book. Now, this was in the jar because it was one of the series that I want to continue, and after completing this book, I realized that while this book and the first book are a duology, there are more books in this series that follow different characters in the same world. So I didn't love book 1, didn't really love book 2, so I'm going to like DNF the series, but I'm going to mark it as complete because I completed the main duology. So instead of marking it as DNF, I'm just going to mark it as complete, say I read the duology, and then pretend like the rest of the books don't exist. Let's go draw another book and see what I get. Apologies for the dryer sounds, but I need to pick a book to read. So, short clip, those will be in the background. Let's go with this one. So this is Fellowship of Bakers and Magic. This was adorable. 5 stars. It is a baking contest set in a fantasy world. You've got elves and dwarves and all sorts of different fantasy creatures. Our main character is a baker, and she's a human who has no magic, and so she's considered like lesser in the world, at least in her own mind, and by some people, but not by all people. And she enters like a Great British Bake Off style contest, and it goes from there. There's a cute little romance in it. It's cozy fantasy. Like, it's just truly cozy fantasy. And I love cozy fantasy, apparently. It's very much in line with Legends and Lattes if you like that kind of story. This is a similar vein, obviously with a different author and different characters, but I very much enjoyed it. Apparently, I had the second book of this series on my TBR, but it doesn't come out until November, so I guess that's why I had this. This was a Kindle Unlimited book, and I wasn't really sure why I had it, but I'm glad I read it because it was 5 stars. It was super freaking cute. Adorable, loved it. I'm excited to draw from the jar again. Let's see what's next. I really still need to get Crescent City in here, so hopefully I draw that next. Let's go with this one. A Curse of Shadows and Thorn. Not Crescent City, but it is what it is. A Curse of Shadows and Thorns. Now, the plotline of this one is a little bit complicated, but I'm going to do my best here. So this follows a young woman named Elise, and she is the niece of the king, and she is of marrying age, and how this upper class society works is she will be married off basically to the highest bidder, and a well-known businessman is basically set in charge of figuring out whomever is going to pay the most for her. Putting her with a good match, not in the sense of a love match, but who's going to benefit the kingdom the most by marrying into the royal family. In addition to this, the land that they live in is kind of cursed, and it used to be ruled over by what I'm going to call an elven family, though there's a completely different name for it in the books. It sounds like elves. They have pointy ears, but it's got its own language. We're just going to call them elves. Simplicity. They were betrayed by a human, and the whole family was killed, and then a human king who were Elise's ancestors took over. Now there is like division within the country where some people believe that the children, or at least one of the children, is still alive and in hiding and will someday claim the throne, and they're called agitators. And that's pretty much the setup for this story. I really enjoyed it at the beginning, probably the first 30 to 40%, really vibing with the story. And then from like the 40 to 70% through the book, it was dragging. It's like, I get the point, do something. And I was quickly losing interest in the book. By the time we got to the action, from like the 70% mark to the end of the book, where, you know, all of the plot twist happened and everything like that, yes, they did happen, but also they were so obvious that I knew what the plot twists were gonna be by the time they happened. And really all this did was just confirm what I knew, so I was kind of bored. It's like, yeah, I could have told you that at 40% when I was still interested in the book, and maybe I would have liked this better. So knock 100 pages off of this book and I think I would have liked it more. But it wasn't bad, it just kind of got boring. So 3 stars. Back to the jar. I desperately need one of the 2 books that I need to read this month to come out this time. Like, desperately. Let's go with this one. A Court This Cruel and Lovely. I think this is it. It is. A Court This Cruel and Lovely. One of the books on my TBR. Perfect. Finally. I did not realize A Court This Cruel and Lonely was over 500 pages, like 550-ish pages, I believe. Pretty much all the books that I've been reading this week are between 300 and 400 pages. Let's talk about this book. This book is a unique plot with a lot of well-used, well-loved tropes in the fantasy romance genre. This is a human kingdom that is apparently constantly under attack by elves. And in order to fight off this invasion, all human children have their magic taken from them when they're born, like days after their birth. And that power is given to the kingdom to prevent the elves invading. At 25, the magic is returned, or at least what's left of their magic after it's been used for years to protect the kingdom. At this 25-year mark, children are tested to see if they retained any of their magic. Now, obviously it's infants giving up their magic, so it's considered rejected by the gods if for some reason you still have magic at 25. You are corrupt, and corrupted based off of the religion of the country are burned at the stake. So our main character obviously is corrupted. Her magical ability is to stop time. She gets discovered when she saves a young girl from being beaten. The young girl tells on her and she has to flee. And she winds up with a group of mercenaries and kind of trades off helping them with her powers to stop time in exchange for an escort into the city where she can get on a ship and flee to a different country. That's the basis of the story. Obviously it goes wild from there, but you're gonna have to read to find out. I enjoyed this. I like the characters, I like the plot. I had fun reading this. I read it very quickly. It was fun. One of the things that stand out to me is the male character. This is a slow burn, enemies to lovers romance because slow burn and enemies to lovers are big tropes. It's more of like annoyed with each other to lovers. Like there's no enemies here, to be real. But in order to do this trope, oftentimes, including this book, the author will make the male character like a total asshole. And I've found that this trope can go well, as it does in this book, or it can go really badly. And the man will do something that makes him irredeemable, where in order to be an asshole when he first meets the female main character, he does something that I personally couldn't forgive him for and can't root for the relationship. Though sometimes people love the relationship later, so it's obviously personal preference. I thought Stacia Stark did a really great job making this guy an asshole without making him an irredeemable asshole. Honestly though, was this the most well-written book? No, it wasn't. It had some problems. There's plot holes, there's pacing issues where it's like super quick in the beginning, and then towards the middle when she's in the castle, which doesn't really give anything away, she could be in the castle for a million reasons, but when she's in the castle, it seems very repetitive and the same thing happening over and over again. It's like, okay, get to we know where you're trying to go, can we get to that point? This seems unnecessary, and it perhaps overuses a lot of really popular tropes, but that's kind of the point. Like, people hate overuse of tropes, but they're popular tropes for a reason. That's never really bothered me unless I hate the trope, but there was no tropes in here that I hate. I found this entertaining, fun, enjoyable, and that's all I really want in a book, at least this type of book, and I am just thriving in my fantasy romance era right now. Even though I keep thinking that I'm burnt out on fantasy romance, I'm not. I'm so enjoying these. So I ended up giving this a 4-star, probably like a 4.5. It wasn't quite up to 5-star standards, but it was very close. But let's continue on with the jar some more. Let's see what I get this time. Let's go with this one. Ooh, I know what this is. This is A Bloodless Ties by Katie Wismere. This is another series that I'm in the middle of. So I have here Bloodless Ties, which is book 3 in the Marionettes series. Finish this off. I'm going to give you the synopsis of the Marionettes because it's book 3. So if I tell you the synopsis of this, it's going to be spoilers for the first 2 books. So this follows Valerie Darkmoor, who is a blood witch, and she is training to become a bodyguard, I think is the best phrase for it, to a vampire. So it's our world, but paranormal. Vampires are the rulers of at least the New York area, and it's kind of like a spicy vampire witch romance school thing. We're way past that at this point. This one I think is my least favorite in the series so far. There is a romantic subplot that I didn't care for, to say the least, in here. Just not my taste in spicy books, I guess. But it is what it is. There's one more book in the series. I'm glad I pulled it, but least favorite book in the series so far is still a 3-star. It was a fine read. The rest of the story I'm enjoying. Just didn't care for that particular romantic subplot, and it kind of ruined my enjoyment of the series as a whole, but not like fully ruined it, if that makes sense. Let's pick another book out of here. This one. Carve a Fey Heart, maybe? Can't read this one. But I think it says To Carve a Fey Heart. We'll put the cover that you could actually see up here, and let's start this one. This may be the last one. It depends on how long this book is and if I DNF it or not, but we'll talk about it and then find out if that's the end of it or if I'm continuing on with something else. I have finished To Carve a Fey Heart, and this one is not really for me. Basically, this is Ireland. The map sure as hell looks like Ireland. but the northern half of the island belongs to the Fae, and then the lower half of the island belongs to the humans, and they have a treaty where every 100 years the Fae choose 2 human women to become brides in one of the Fae courts. It's right at that 100-year mark, and it's the autumn court's time, I believe. Oh, I'm pretty sure it's the autumn court. I could be wrong on which court it is. And so obviously we follow a female human who is going to be selected to be the Autumn King's bride, but obviously a bunch of stuff comes before them. There's no way that that is a spoiler to anybody reading this book. Like, if you read the synopsis, you can't possibly believe that that is a spoiler for a romance. But our main character is studying to be a surgeon, and she obviously does not want to be the bride of a Fae King. And when her and her sister, because it's 2 brides, her and her sister end up there, like a bunch of weird shit is happening, and they're like always right on the edge of a war. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm not really gonna go anything more into it. My main problem with this is it heavily relies on a miscommunication trope, and I hate miscommunication tropes. Like, you see it mostly in contemporary romances, which is why I don't like contemporary romances, but I don't see it a whole lot in fantasy romance, but boy howdy did they do it here. And you might ask, like, why didn't you DNF it? It's because I suspected it was a miscommunication trope, but I wasn't 100% sure until like the 60-70% mark, and by that point it's like, well, I might as well finish this once it was confirmed that yes, this is miscommunication. I'm just gaslighting myself hoping that it's not. I didn't actually care for either the female or male main character. They were both like unlikable in different ways. The male main character was a wet noodle. Just like no personality whatsoever. And the female main character was racist. And I mean, she's racist towards fairies, which don't exist, but it was still, she gave Republican vibes, if you know what I mean there. So yeah, I didn't particularly care for either one of them. I couldn't possibly see what they saw in each other. That is indeed the last book that I am reading for this video. So we're done. You've made it to the end. Thank you for being here with me. I ended up reading 8 books this week. 8. And I DNF'd 3. So 11 books off my TBR total, and just a blast of a time reading fantasy romance all week. Like, it was so enjoyable. I found a 5-star. I found some books that I didn't particularly care for, but overall I had a great time. And I think pulling out of the jar was kind of fun. We're gonna keep this around. I think this was really fun. I would definitely use it again. If you guys like this video, let me know. I could do it again on another date. Pick some random fantasy romance, maybe introduce y'all to some indie authors that you maybe have never heard of, just because I randomly got them for free. I will see you next week for another vlog. It is February, so next week's vlog is going to be a heavy focus on reading Black authors. I hope it's rather obvious that you should be reading Black, other POC, and generally diverse books all the time, but I do like to do at least one focus vlog on specifically Black authors in February. Though I read tons of Black authors all the time, I'm pretty sure I featured a Black author in every video I've done this month, and not on purpose. Read diversely. Don't just read Black authors during February. But yeah, I'll see you for that video next week, and bye!